Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so you sent us a really fascinating stack of material this time, all centered on, well, one of the biggest publishing sensations of the last 20 years or so, Rhonda Byrne's The Secret.
Yeah, that one came out in 2006.
Right, and it just exploded. Became this huge cultural phenomena, promising, basically the keys to everything, unlimited wealth, health, happiness, all through the power of your thoughts.
It's definitely an essential deep dive because pretty much everyone has bumped into the core idea, right? The law of attraction. So our mission today feels pretty crucial. Let's try and get past the hype, really dig into the critiques you shared, and, rigorously separate what might actually be empowering from the really grand, often unsupported claims.
Looking for the useful bits hidden inside the maybe mysticism.
Exactly. Where's the actionable knowledge here?
Okay, the basic premise, you have to admit, it's undeniably compelling. This idea that your thoughts directly influence your reality, well, that's powerful stuff.
It really is.
So before we get into what works and maybe what doesn't, we probably need to lay out the central mechanics of this law of attraction. What does the book say you actually have to do to tap into this force?
Right. So the book frames it not just as a philosophy, but as a universal law, like gravity,
Okay.
based on this principle that, attracts like. Your dominant thoughts are supposed to determine the frequency you're emitting.
Your vibrational frequency?
Yeah, that term. And that frequency then attracts things, people, outcomes, objects that are vibrating at the same frequency.
And the source material details how you do this, like steps.
It does. It lays out 3 sort of mandatory steps for manifestation.
Well, let's define those steps then. What's step 1?
First, you have to ask. And this means being absolutely clear, really specific about what you desire. No vagueness allowed.
Okay, clarity. Got it. Step 2.
Second, you have to believe. Now, this is maybe the trickiest part. You've got to cultivate this unwavering, absolute faith that you've already received it, whatever it is, even before there's any physical proof.
Wow, okay. That sounds intense.
It is. And third, you must receive, which means being open to accepting the outcome when it comes and, crucially, taking what the book calls inspired action towards your goal.
That believe step. I find that one particularly fascinating. And honestly, it sounds emotionally exhausting. It's not just being optimistic, is it?
No.
It sounds like it requires almost, radical self-delusion, believing something's already happened when, all the evidence says it hasn't.
That's a fair point. How do they justify that mental burden?
Yeah.
Well, the justification comes back to that vibrational alignment idea.
Right.
The book basically argues that if you have any doubt, any lack of faith, your vibrational frequency drops. And then you actually repel what you want.
So the pressure is immense.
Huge pressure. You have to maintain this relentless positivity because, in their view, even the slightest negative thought is like throwing a wrench in the whole manifestation engine.
Okay. Let's shift gears then. Let's unpack the incredible appeal. This book, the documentary, they exploded globally.
They really did.
So what practical strengths fueled this? Because it seems rooted in some pretty effective packaging and maybe some sound, basic psychological ideas.
Precisely. Accessibility is just unmatched, isn't it?
Yeah, seems that way.
The sources praise the simple, easy-to-grasp language, the beautiful, almost cinematic presentation of the ideas, especially in the film, and maybe more importantly, the use of personal success stories, testimonials. That's a really powerful motivational tool, It makes this abstract concept feel tangible, achievable.
Right. But the real strength, the part that maybe actually works, seems to be where it accidentally overlaps with, established psychology.
Yes, exactly. Which elements have some science behind them.
Yeah.
We're looking at techniques that are pretty foundational to positive psychology, the kind of work pioneered by people like Martin Seligman.
The godfather of positive psychology.
That's the one. So, The Secret, maybe unintentionally, encourages things like optimistic thinking, having a regular gratitude practice, and a really strong emphasis on personal responsibility.
That emphasis on personal responsibility must be a huge emotional draw for people feeling powerless.
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely empowering for some. When you're told, look, you are 100% responsible for your destiny, it directly fights that feeling of learned helplessness.
Right.
It encourages people to stop seeing themselves as just victims of circumstance and start looking for levers they can actually pull to make changes.
And when we look at specific exercises, like gratitude, the science there is pretty solid, isn't it?
Totally solid. Daily gratitude exercises. They're scientifically proven to boost well-being, increase happiness levels, even show some positive physical health outcomes.
Okay.
And the visualization techniques The Secret promotes, they aren't actually magic. They're used successfully in various high-stakes, evidence-based fields.
Like where, for example?
Well, you see it extensively in elite sports psychology. Athletes visualize successful plays, perfect form, to optimize their skills and confidence.
Makes sense.
It's also used in some medical contexts, like pre-surgical preparation. Patients visualize successful procedures, rapid recovery. And it can genuinely improve outcomes.
So the positive mindset isn't necessarily manifesting $1 million out of thin air.
Right.
But it is demonstrably helping with resilience, focus, problem solving when facing real challenges.
Exactly. That's the key difference.
And that distinction, improving resilience versus magically guaranteeing results, that seems to be where the conversation really shifts. Because while the optimism is powerful, the wheels kind of start to come off when we look at the core scientific claims and, maybe more importantly, the potential for harm.
Right. They certainly do. I think the biggest drawback, according to the critiques you sent, is just profound oversimplification.
How so?
The book boils down incredibly complex, multifaceted issues. Think chronic illness, generational poverty, systemic inequality to just change your thoughts.
It minimizes external reality almost to an absurd degree.
Yeah.
The sources point out that The Secret pretty much ignores the role of systemic barriers, discrimination, and also, the immense contribution of hard work, actual skill, and sometimes just sheer luck.
And maybe most critically, it fails to acknowledge the reality of mental health conditions.
Right. That seems crucial.
Yeah, for someone struggling with clinical anxiety, for example, which is often characterized by uncontrollable, negative, intrusive thoughts, well, simply choosing to change their dominant thought pattern isn't really an option.
It ignores the underlying biology or chemistry.
Exactly. It ignores the neurobiological realities that often need professional intervention, not just, more motivation.
Okay, then we hit the scientific claims themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the biggest conflict seems to arise.
Mm-hmm.
If the law of attraction is supposed to be a universal law, like gravity, it should operate predictably. It should be backed by data.
And this is a major point of criticism in the sources. The claims are presented with this air of scientific authority, like physics, but they're totally devoid of peer-reviewed research or controlled studies.
It relies on anecdotes.
Purely anecdotal evidence and testimonials. But what's really fascinating is how they try to justify it scientifically.
Okay, tell us about that. What's the mechanism they claim?
Well, they rely heavily on what the critics call cherry-picking quantum physics.
Ah, okay. I've heard this criticism.
Right. The Secret throws around terms like vibrational frequency or energy, as if these concepts from physics are directly interchangeable with human thoughts and desires.
Implying our consciousness affects reality on a big scale.
They imply that the subatomic laws governing, say, particle observation somehow mean your consciousness is literally creating reality on a macroscopic level. A new car, a job offer.
So borrowing the authority of a complex science
Exactly.
and applying it in a way that's completely unsupported by that science itself.
Precisely. It's scientific misrepresentation, plain and simple. Quantum mechanics deals with probabilities, the behavior of incredibly tiny particles. It does not support the idea that the universe, or some cosmic energy field, is listening to your intentions and physically manifesting things for you.
So the belief that thoughts alone create physical outcomes.
That's basically the definition of magical thinking. It's not presented as a fundamental force of nature in any credible scientific model.
And this lack of scientific rigor, this magical thinking, it leads directly to the most sensitive criticism, doesn't it? The potential for genuinely harmful messages.
Yes.
Because if my thoughts are magnets and something bad happens to me, misfortune, illness, then the inescapable conclusion is
that you attracted it. That's the dangerous trajectory. The potential for victim blaming is immense.
Yeah.
Suggesting that people struggling with disease or financial ruin or even experiencing violence somehow manifested these awful things through their own negative thinking. It's not only cruel, it's just deeply inaccurate.
It puts the blame, the guilt, squarely on the person who's already suffering.
Absolutely. It creates this tremendous burden of guilt, especially for those already struggling with depression or anxiety, telling them their negative thoughts are the reason for their suffering.
And potentially stops them seeking real help.
That's perhaps the greatest harm identified in the critiques. It can actively discourage people from seeking out the appropriate, professional, evidence-based help they actually need, whether the problem is structural, medical, or psychological.
Okay. It really feels like we have to separate the maybe motivational fuel from the actual engine here.
That's a good way to put it.
So let's try and synthesize these two sides for you, the listener. What parts should you maybe hold on to, and which bits really need to be discarded?
Okay, if we distill the sources, the things that seem to genuinely work are the practical psychological tools embedded in it.
Knocked on.
Gratitude practice, that's a proven well-being booster. Goal visualization, when used for focus and motivation, not manifestation. Developing a positive mindset generally increases resilience. And accepting personal responsibility, where appropriate, empowers genuine change.
So hold on to those because they're action-oriented and have some scientific backing.
Right, they're validated.
And what absolutely must be discarded based on the critiques.
You really have to discard the magical thinking, the core belief that thoughts alone are sufficient to create physical reality.
Right.
You have to discard the tendency of ignoring action. Belief is just not a substitute for taking concrete, measurable steps towards a goal.
Makes sense.
And finally, you really have to reject this idea of dismissing negative emotions. Our emotions, even the difficult ones, are critical feedback. Suppressing them isn't healthy or sustainable.
Okay, I have to push back just slightly on that magical thinking point, though.
Oh,
We just agreed the placebo effect is real, right? The power of belief itself can have tangible effects. So for someone who's really stuck, maybe needs an immediate, almost spiritual kind of kickstart, could the magical thinking be a necessary bridge? A beneficial lie, perhaps?
That's a really thoughtful question, and it gets right to the core dilemma, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The placebo effect is real, no doubt. But it works primarily on our internal state neurological pathways, physiological responses. It doesn't fundamentally change the external physical world around us.
Okay.
The problem with The Secret's approach is that it makes the magical expectation the primary driver. It can displace necessary action, critical thinking, problem solving. It encourages you to sort of wait for the universe to deliver rather than actively building the bridge yourself.
So the difference between self-motivation and maybe self-delusion.
That's a good way to frame it. One empowers action, the other encourages passivity, disguised as faith.
Okay. Given that crucial distinction, then, who ultimately might benefit most from reading this book, even with all the caveats?
Well, the sources suggest the book could be most helpful for those who are genuinely stuck in really extreme negative thinking patterns. Or maybe people paralyzed by a total lack of motivation.
Like a catalyst.
Exactly. It can serve as this accessible, high-energy catalyst that gives them permission, almost, to change their internal narrative and maybe start moving.
Conversely, who should absolutely avoid relying on this material, according to the critiques?
Based on the analysis, it's explicitly not recommended for people dealing with serious clinical mental health issues. That needs professional support.
Right.
Also, not for those facing genuine systemic barriers that require political or structural solutions, not just positive thinking, and probably not for individuals who might already be prone to externalizing responsibility and really need grounding in reality and evidence-based planning.
Okay. So for listeners looking for similar positive outcomes like more resilience, better goal achievement, but want it filtered through a more science-backed lens, the review suggests some good alternatives.
Yes, definitely. The focus there shifts strongly towards behavioral and cognitive adjustments. The sources strongly recommend looking into cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, techniques, even the basic principles. This is where you learn to manage distressing thoughts by focusing on making specific, small, manageable behavioral changes.
Actively rewiring your reactions.
Exactly. It's about doing, not just thinking or wishing.
What else?
Another excellent alternative is embracing growth mindset concepts, popularized by Carol Dweck.
Right. Focusing on effort over innate talent.
Precisely. It shifts the focus from waiting for the universe to taking ownership of your ability to learn, adapt, and grow, especially from failure. We also see recommendations for very action-focused guides like Atomic Habits.
James Clear. Great book.
Yeah. And programs like Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, MBSR, that trains you to manage thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. Observation without judgment.
So ultimately, the reviewer landed on a 2.5 out of 5 rating for The Secret. That's a perfect split decision, isn't it?
It really is. It acknowledges the motivational spark while seriously docking points for the lack of evidence and the potential harms we discussed.
So that cautious rating really underlines the need for critical thinking.
Absolutely. The final takeaway seems pretty clear. Read with caution. Take the psychological gold dart, the gratitude bits, the goal-setting motivation, but be prepared to entirely discard the quasi-scientific magical thinking.
Understand the positive intention needs to be paired with action.
Concrete, persistent action. That's what generates real-world results.
So that seems to be the bottom line from the sources you shared. The secret contains some valuable psychological principles, yes, but they're wrapped up in unsupported mystical claims and some pretty slick commercial packaging. It can be a powerful kickstart to change your perspective, maybe shake things up if you're stuck, but it's definitely not a scientifically accurate guide to fundamentally improving your life on its own. You have to keep that critical filter firmly in place.
Precisely. And, if we connect this back to the bigger picture for a second, the motivating power of a strong belief is undeniable. We see it with the placebo effect, the mind-body connection. These things have scientific grounding.
Okay.
So this raises a really important question, maybe something for you, the listener, to consider moving forward. When is the motivating power of a strong belief, even if the specific mechanism proposed is scientifically unfounded, a valuable self-propelling tool, especially for getting started? And when does that same belief become a harmful distraction from necessary action, from tackling structural problems, or from seeking professional, evidence-based help?
That's an essential question for anyone navigating the sometimes confusing world of self-help. A really important thought to leave us with. Thank you for sharing these sources and walking us through this modern phenomenon.
My pleasure.
Keep pairing that curiosity with critical evaluation, everyone, and we will see you on the next deep dive.